The scent of rosemary and garlic filled our kitchen as I arranged the roasted potatoes around the perfectly seared ribeye. Everything had to be perfect tonight. The promotion Caleb had worked towards for 3 years had finally come through, and I wanted this dinner to feel special, like the ones we used to have before life got so complicated. I'm Aurora, and this was the last perfect moment I'd have with my family. Mom, this looks amazing. Emma's eyes widened as she helped me set the table. My 16-year-old daughter still had that way of making everything seem magical, even a simple family dinner. Mason slouched in, his college textbooks tucked under one arm. Dad's running late again? He texted. 20 minutes. I adjusted the wine glasses, making sure they caught the light just right. He said he has big news about the promotion. Bigger than being named Vice President of Technology? Emma arranged the napkins with precise angles, a habit she'd picked up from her father. The front door opened and Caleb's footsteps echoed through the foyer. Different somehow. Heavier. When he appeared in the doorway, his face was set in stone. Everything okay, honey? I moved to kiss him, but he stepped back. We need to talk. His voice was flat. All of us. Mason straightened in his chair. Dad, I've met someone. Caleb's words fell like ice into still water. Her name is Olivia. She works in marketing at Innovatech. Emma's napkin slipped from her fingers. What do you mean, I met someone? I mean, I'm in love with her. He wouldn't look at any of us. She's 28, brilliant, and she understands me in ways… Well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I need you all to leave. Leave? My voice didn't sound like my own. This is our home. It's my home. I bought it with my money, my career. Now he looked at me, and I saw nothing of the man I'd married. Olivia's moving in next week. I've already spoken to my lawyer. You'll be well taken care of, but I need you out by Friday. Mason shot up from his chair, sending his water glass flying. You fucking bastard. Mason, don't. I grabbed his arm, feeling the tremors of rage beneath his skin. 3 days? Emma's voice cracked. You're giving us 3 days? Caleb checked his watch, the one I'd given him for our 20th anniversary. I have a dinner meeting. The paperwork will be delivered tomorrow. I suggest you start packing tonight. He turned and walked out, leaving our perfect dinner growing cold on the table. The roasted potatoes I'd seasoned just the way he liked them. The wine I'd chosen to celebrate his success. Our success. 23 years of marriage reduced to 3 days' notice. Mason punched the wall, leaving a dent in the pristine plaster. Emma collapsed into silent tears, and I stood there, watching my family shatter like a crystal glass dropped on concrete. But something else was rising in me. Something cold and sharp and certain. Caleb thought he could discard us like outdated technology, replace us with a newer model. He thought money and lawyers would clean his conscience. He was wrong. I pulled Emma close, gestured for Mason to join us. My children, my heart beating in 2 bodies. Listen to me, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. We're going to be okay. Better than okay. How? Emma whispered against my shoulder. I stroked her hair, but my eyes fixed on the family portrait hanging on the wall, the one where Caleb's smile now looked like a lie. Because your father just made the biggest mistake of his life, and I'm going to make sure he knows it. Mason's fist unclenched slightly. Mom? Start packing, I said. But only what matters. We're not just leaving, we're going to war. The perfect dinner sat abandoned on the table, a last supper for a family that no longer existed. But from its ashes, something else was being born. Something Caleb and his young marketing executive never saw coming. Me. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and pretense. I sat rigid in the plush chair, watching Emma trace invisible patterns on her jeans while Mason glared holes through the mahogany desk. 3 cardboard boxes of our life sat in my car downstairs. Everything we could pack in 48 hours. Mrs. Hanson, these terms are quite generous. The lawyer, Patricia something, slid the papers across the desk. Mr. Hanson is offering temporary housing allowance, child support above state requirements, and… And what about college? Mason's voice cut through the corporate pleasantries. My tuition's due next month. Patricia's perfectly manicured fingers tapped her tablet. Your father has agreed to continue. My father hasn't agreed to shit. Mason stood up, his chair scraping against hardwood. He agreed to throw us out for his midlife crisis girlfriend. Mason, please. I touched his arm, felt the tension thrumming beneath his skin. Sit down. Emma hadn't spoken since we'd arrived. Her silence was becoming its own kind of scream. There's something else. Patricia's voice shifted, softer now. Mr. Hansen has requested limited contact with the children for the next 30 days to allow everyone time to adjust. Emma's head snapped up. He what? It's a cooling-off period, Patricia explained, but I saw through the corporate euphemism. Caleb wanted us gone completely. No messy emotions to complicate his fresh start with Olivia. Sign the papers, Mom. Mason's words surprised me. Sign them and let's get out of here. I picked up the pen, its weight foreign in my hand. 23 years of marriage reduced to a signature line. Before you sign, Patricia cleared her throat, there's a confidentiality clause regarding Mr. Hansen's relationship with Miss Brooks. The company has certain concerns about workplace dynamics. The pen stilled in my hand. Workplace dynamics? Given Miss Brooks's position in marketing and Mr. Hansen's recent promotion, you mean they're worried I'll tell everyone he's fucking someone half his age? The words tasted like battery acid. Patricia's professional mask slipped for just a moment. Mrs. Hansen. Mom. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Can we just go, please? I signed. The scratch of pen on paper sounded like surrender. Outside, the September sun felt too bright, too normal for a day when everything had changed. Mason helped Emma into the car while I stood on the sidewalk, watching the city move around us like nothing had happened. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Lawyer confirmed papers are signed. House keys? I typed back. Under the mat by 5. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I'm sorry it ended this way. Sorry. Like he'd forgotten to pick up milk on his way home. Mom? Emma called from the car. Where are we going? I slipped my phone into my pocket without responding to Caleb. Remember Sarah, my college roommate? The real estate agent? Mason frowned. She has a rental property across town. It's small, but I don't care where we go. Emma's voice cracked. I just want to stop feeling like this. I got in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Emma, look at me. Both of you. I met their eyes in the rearview mirror. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. Of what? Mason's anger had settled into something darker, more determined. My phone buzzed again. Another text, but not from Caleb. Sarah. You won't believe who I just saw at Innovatech. Call me ASAP. Of Justice, I said, starting the car. Your father thinks he can rewrite our story, make us disappear into the background of his new life. But he forgot something important. What's that? Emma asked. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the lawyer's office and its papers behind. Every story has 2 sides, and I'm about to make sure everyone hears mine. Mason leaned forward. What are you planning? First, we're going to see Sarah. I merged into traffic, feeling something crystallize inside me. Then we're going to learn exactly who Olivia Brooks is, and what she really wants from your father. The city stretched before us, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. And I intended to uncover every single one. Sarah's office felt like a confessional, all dark wood and hushed tones. She slid her tablet across the desk, her face grim. Look at these, Aurora. They're from Innovatech's internal newsletter archives. The images showed Olivia at various company events over the past 3 years. Different men, same predatory smile. In each photo, she stood close to someone in management, someone with power. The final image showed her with Caleb at last month's charity gala, his hand possessive on her waist. She's done this before. Sarah said quietly. 3 times that I know of. Always married executives, always during major company transitions. My fingers traced the screen, stopping on Caleb's face. The promotion wasn't because of his work, was it? Olivia's uncle sits on the board. The same uncle who approved the last 3 promotions of men she was involved with. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. And the others? Divorced, demoted. One left the country. Sarah leaned forward. But here's what you need to know. She's not just after Caleb. She's after his position. My phone buzzed. Emma. Dad's moving the rest of our stuff to storage tomorrow. Says we have to be there to claim what we want. I ignored it. Tell me everything. Sarah pulled up more documents. Olivia's been strategic. Each man she targeted held positions she wanted access to. The affairs always coincided with corporate restructuring. And Caleb? His new position puts him in charge of the company's digital transformation project. 9-figure budget, complete autonomy. Jesus. The pieces clicked together like tumblers in a lock. She's using him. Aurora? Sarah hesitated. There's more. Remember James Morton? The name hit like a slap. Caleb's old mentor? The one who killed himself last year after the embezzlement scandal? Olivia was his assistant before moving to marketing. My hands started shaking. No. The investigation was buried, but I have friends in HR. The money trail led to offshore accounts, but they could never prove who set them up. Mason's voice came from the doorway, making us both jump. So she's not just destroying families, she's stealing from the company? Mason. I stood up. You should be at the rental with Emma. She's with her counselor. He stepped into the office, jaw set. I heard everything, Mom. We can't let her do this to Dad. Your father made his choice, I said, but the words felt hollow. Did he? Mason grabbed the tablet, scrolling through the photos. Or did she choose him, like she chose the others? Sarah cleared her throat. There's something else. The company's annual leadership retreat is next weekend. Caleb's scheduled to present the transformation project. With Olivia at his side, I guessed, as his new project manager. The room went quiet. I could hear my heartbeat, steady and sure like a war drum. Mom? Mason's voice had lost its anger, replaced by something darker. What are we going to do? I looked at the photos again. Olivia's smile, practiced and perfect. Caleb's hand on her waist. James Morton's suicide, swept under corporate carpets. Sarah, I need everything you have. Documents, photos, names. My voice sounded strange, even to me. And I need to know who else she hurt. Aurora, be careful. Sarah's eyes were worried. She's dangerous. So am I. I gathered my purse, my hands steady now. She thinks she's destroying my family to build her career. She's wrong. What's she wrong about? Mason asked. Everything. I headed for the door, my mind already racing ahead. She thinks Caleb's her path to power, but she forgot to look behind her. Where are you going? To talk to James Morton's widow. I paused at the threshold. Mason, go home to Emma, and don't tell her anything yet. Mom. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. What if this makes things worse? I thought of Caleb's cold eyes across the dinner table, of Emma's silent tears, of the house keys under the mat. Of James Morton's widow, living with questions no one would answer. It's already worse, honey. I squeezed his arm. Now we're just going to make it right. The evening sun painted the city in shades of fire as I drove toward the suburbs where Janet Morton still lived. Somewhere across town, Caleb and Olivia were probably celebrating their victory, planning their future. They had no idea what was coming. Janet Morton's living room was a shrine to what she'd lost. James smiled from every photo. At company parties, family gatherings, their son's graduation. His absence felt like another person in the room. I wondered when someone would come asking questions. Janet poured tea with steady hands, though I didn't expect it to be Caleb Hansen's wife. Ex-wife. I corrected automatically. Not yet. She settled into her armchair. But soon enough, if Olivia follows her usual pattern. My cup froze halfway to my lips. You knew? About Olivia? I knew everything. Janet's smile was sharp as broken glass, including what she did to James. She reached for a locked drawer in the side table, produced a manila envelope. James kept records. He wasn't just paranoid. He was afraid. Inside were printouts of emails, bank statements, photographs. My hands trembled as I read. The embezzlement was a setup. Janet's voice hardened. Olivia orchestrated everything. Used James's login credentials, planted evidence, then threatened to expose him unless he played along with her uncle's schemes. But why didn't he fight back? She had other leverage. Photos of James with a female employee. Photos she staged at the holiday party when he was drunk. He chose suicide over destroying our family's reputation. My phone buzzed. Caleb. Need to discuss Emma's tuition. Meet tomorrow? I ignored it. Janet, these records won't help legally. Too circumstantial, too late. She leaned forward. But that's not why you're here, is it? No. I met her eyes. I need to know how to stop her. You can't. Not directly. Janet gathered the papers, handed me the envelope. But you can make her destroy herself. How? The same way she operates, through others. People she's hurt, people she's using. Janet stood, moved to a photo of James at his desk. Olivia's power comes from isolation. She separates people, turns them against each other. But if those people started talking... My phone buzzed again. Emma. Dad wants to have dinner tomorrow. Just him and me. Should I go? She's targeting my daughter now, I whispered. Of course she is. Janet's voice was gentle. Divide and conquer. It's what she does. I stood up, clutching the envelope. Thank you for... Wait. Janet disappeared into another room, returned with a business card. There's someone else you should talk to. Marcus Chen, Innovatech's former chief financial officer. The one who resigned suddenly last year? After his divorce, after Olivia. Janet pressed the card into my hand. He's been gathering his own evidence, waiting for the right moment. My phone lit up again. Caleb. Aurora, please respond. Important to maintain communication for kids' sake. She'll destroy him too, won't she? I asked quietly. She already has. He just doesn't know it yet. Janet walked me to the door. But, Aurora, be careful. The moment Olivia realizes you're connecting the dots... I know. I touched the envelope, felt its weight. But she made a mistake. What's that? She thought breaking my marriage would break me. I stepped into the evening air. Instead, she gave me nothing left to lose. In my car, I finally checked my messages. One more, from Mason. Mom, Emma's crying. Dad told her he's bringing Olivia to her school play next week. I started the engine, my mind racing. Janet's words echoed. Divide and conquer. But two could play that game. I dialed Marcus Chen's number, watching the sunset over Janet Morton's shrine to a ruined life. He answered on the second ring. Chen speaking. Mr. Chen, my name is Aurora Hansen. Janet Morton suggested I call. I pulled away from the curb, heading toward my daughter. I believe we have someone in common we need to discuss. Mrs. Hansen. His voice changed, became careful. I've been expecting this call. Have you? Yes. A pause. How would you like to attend a board meeting next week? As my guest? I thought of Emma's play, of Olivia sitting in my seat, of James Morton's smile in those photographs. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Marcus Chen's corner office overlooked the city like a glass fortress. He spread Janet Morton's documents across his desk, adding his own files to the growing evidence. Each page was another nail in Olivia's coffin, and Caleb's career. The board meeting's tomorrow. Marcus tapped a financial report. Caleb's presenting the digital transformation project. 9 figures of company money, complete autonomy. And Olivia? Positioned herself as project manager last week. Through her uncle's influence, of course. He smiled thinly. Just like she did with me before the audit. My phone lit up. Emma. Dad's here with her. At my play rehearsal. Everyone's staring. My fingers tightened on the phone. How do we stop them? We don't. Marcus pulled out a USB drive. We let them stop themselves. These are the real financial projections for the project. The ones Olivia helped Caleb adjust. Fraud? Enough to trigger an SEC investigation. He slid the drive across the desk. Tomorrow, Caleb presents his fantasy numbers to the board. Then I present these. My throat went dry. You're going to destroy him. No, Aurora. Olivia already destroyed him. We're just turning on the lights. Another message. Mason. Mom? Emma ran off stage crying. Dad's acting like nothing's wrong. There's something else you should see. Marcus pulled up an email chain. Olivia's been communicating with your divorce lawyer, helping Caleb build a case for full custody. The room tilted. What? She's systematically eliminating threats. You, the children, anyone who might interfere with her plans. He leaned forward. The question is, what are you willing to do about it? I stared at the USB drive. 23 years of marriage, 2 children, a lifetime of memories reduced to evidence of corporate fraud. If we do this, I said slowly, everyone gets hurt. Not just Olivia. They're already hurt. Marcus's voice softened. Ask yourself, what happens if we don't? My phone buzzed again. A photo from Emma. Olivia sitting in my usual seat, her hand on Caleb's arm, both smiling while Emma stood alone on stage. The board meeting's at 10, Marcus said. I'll need your answer by 9. I picked up the USB drive, felt its weight. What happened to your children after your divorce? His face tightened. Olivia convinced my ex-wife I was unstable. Dangerous. I haven't seen them in 8 months. The drive felt hot in my palm. A weapon or a shield, I wasn't sure which. 9 o'clock, I said, standing. Aurora. Marcus's voice stopped me at the door. Whatever you decide, remember, Olivia's counting on your conscience, your decency. It's what makes you vulnerable. No, I turned back. It's what makes me different from her. Outside, the city lights blurred through tears I refused to shed. My phone rang. Caleb. Aurora, we need to talk about Emma. Do we? She's struggling. Maybe it's time to consider alternative arrangements. Alternative arrangements. Like James Morton's suicide. Like Marcus Chen's lost children. You're right, I said. Things need to change. I'm glad you understand. Olivia thinks... Goodbye, Caleb. I ended the call, staring at the USB drive. Tomorrow at 9, I'd have to choose between destroying my children's father and letting Olivia destroy us all. My phone lit up one last time. Emma. Mom, please come get me. I started the car, my decision crystallizing like ice. Olivia thought she could use my conscience against me. But she forgot something crucial. A mother's love isn't decent. It isn't clean. It's primal and fierce and willing to burn everything to protect what matters. I pulled away from Innovatech, heading toward my daughter. Tomorrow at 9, I'd show them all exactly what that meant. The Innovatech boardroom felt like a courtroom, all polished wood and judgment. I sat beside Marcus Chen, watching Caleb command the room with practiced charm. Olivia stood at his shoulder, perfectly poised in Chanel, while board members nodded at their fabricated projections. The digital transformation will revolutionize our market position, Caleb declared, his confidence absolute. The numbers speak for themselves. I touched the USB drive in my pocket. They weren't the only numbers that could speak. Questions? Caleb smiled, victorious. Marcus shifted beside me, ready to stand. But before he could, Olivia stepped forward. Actually, I have something to add. She clicked to a new slide. My heart stopped. There on the screen was an email chain between Marcus and me. Our entire plan. Exposed. It seems we have a situation, Olivia continued smoothly. A disgruntled ex-employee conspiring with a bitter soon-to-be ex-wife to sabotage this project. Marcus went rigid. How did you— Your encryption needs work. She smiled, all teeth. Just like your custody agreement needed work. The board chairman leaned forward. Mr. Chen, is this true? I stood up, USB drive in hand. The real numbers are irrelevant, Olivia cut in. What's relevant is the restraining order being processed against both of you for corporate espionage and harassment. Caleb wouldn't look at me. His hands gripped the podium, knuckles white. Security will escort you out, Olivia continued. And Aurora? Emma's custody hearing is tomorrow. I'd hate for this incident to influence the judge's decision. The room spun. She'd known. All along, she'd known and let us walk right into her trap. You can't— Marcus started. I already have. Olivia's voice dropped. Did you really think I wouldn't protect what's mine? Security appeared at the door. Professional, discreet, ready to remove the troublemakers. I looked at Caleb one last time, searching for any trace of the man I'd loved. He finally met my eyes and I saw something there. Doubt? Regret? But then Olivia touched his arm and the moment shattered. Outside, Marcus slumped against the wall. She'll destroy everything. Everyone. My phone buzzed. Emma. Mom? There are police at school asking questions about you. What's happening? Then Mason. Dad's lawyer called. Said you're having a breakdown. They're filing for emergency custody. The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. In one morning, Olivia had taken everything. My children, my credibility, my chance at justice. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered. I thought we could stop her. We still can. The words surprised me, rising from some deep, unbroken place. How? She has everything. No. I straightened, remembering Janet Morton's shrine of photographs. She has evidence, documents, legal maneuvers, but we have something she'll never understand. What's that? The truth. I pulled out my phone, dialed Janet's number. And people willing to tell it no matter the cost. Aurora, don't. Marcus grabbed my arm. Think about what you're risking. I thought about Emma crying on stage, Mason's rage, James Morton's suicide, Marcus's lost children, all the lives Olivia had casually destroyed in her climb to power. I'm not risking anything, I said. She's already taken everything. Now it's her turn to lose. Janet answered on the first ring. I saw the police reports. Are you okay? No. I watched security escort Marcus to his car. But I will be. Get everyone together. Everyone she's hurt. It's time to tell their stories. She'll fight back harder. Let her. I headed to my own car, determination replacing despair. She thinks she's won because she has power, money, influence. But she forgot something important. What's that? I started the engine, watching Olivia and Caleb emerge from the building, triumphant. The thing about truth? It doesn't need proof to be powerful. It just needs to be heard. And I intended to make sure everyone heard it, starting now. The Innovatech shareholders meeting buzzed with tension. I stood at the back, watching Olivia command the room with practiced grace. Caleb sat among the board members, his face a mask of confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. Janet Morton appeared beside me, followed by Marcus Chen and 3 other women I'd never met. Each carried a folder. Each wore the same expression of quiet determination. Ready? Janet whispered. I nodded, thinking of Emma's tear-stained face at yesterday's custody hearing. Of Mason's rage when the judge ruled in Caleb's favor. Some wounds could only be healed by truth. Olivia was mid-presentation when I stepped forward. I have a question about corporate governance. She faltered for just a moment. Questions will be addressed at— specifically about James Morton's death. The room went silent. And the other lives you've destroyed. Security, Olivia started, but Janet was already moving. My husband didn't commit suicide. Janet's voice carried to every corner. He was murdered by corruption, by manipulation, by her. The first folder opened. Financial records spilled across the conference table. Marcus stepped forward. The same corruption that's in your current projections. The same fraud that destroyed 3 other executives before Caleb Hansen. More folders. More evidence. The other women stepped up, each with their own story of destruction. This is absurd. Olivia laughed, but her eyes darted to her uncle on the board. These people are clearly disturbed, like Thomas Reed was disturbed. One woman stepped forward. Before you drove him to rehab with fabricated addiction claims? Or Michael Chen's children. Another woman joined in. Before you convinced child services he was dangerous? Caleb stood up slowly. Olivia, what are they talking about? They're lying. But her polished veneer was cracking. This is obviously a coordinated attack. By whom? I met her eyes. All these people, all these stories, every ruined life just happened to coordinate? The board chairman was examining the documents, his face darkening. Olivia's uncle wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Caleb? Olivia turned to him, voice honey-sweet. You know me. Tell them... Do I? He picked up one of the folders. Like James Morton knew you? Before the audit that destroyed him? I did it for us, she hissed. Everything I did was to secure our future, to give you what you wanted. What I wanted? His laugh was hollow. I wanted a promotion, Olivia. Not this trail of destruction. The chairman stood. Miss Brooks, these allegations are nothing without proof. She straightened, composure returning. And you'll find nothing links directly to me. I'm very careful about that. Except one thing. I pulled out my phone, pressed play. Her voice filled the room. I did it for us. Everything I did was to secure our future. The blood drained from her face. You recorded our entire conversation? Yes. I stepped closer. You taught me something important, Olivia. About being careful. About protecting what matters. You bitch. She lunged forward, mask finally shattering completely. Security caught her arms as the chairman called for an immediate board meeting. Caleb stared at the evidence scattered across the table, 23 years of marriage weighing against 6 months of lies. Aurora, he started. Don't. I gathered my phone, my dignity. This wasn't for you. It was for every life she destroyed, every family she broke. Including ours? Our family was broken the moment you chose power over love. I turned to leave, then paused. The custody hearing appeal is Monday. Don't fight it. I won't. His voice was quiet. I'm sorry. I know. And I did know. But knowledge wasn't the same as forgiveness. Outside, Janet touched my arm. It's over. No. I watched Olivia being escorted out, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. It's just beginning. For all of us. The morning sun felt different on my face. Clearer somehow. Like truth had burned away the shadows where lies once lived. My phone buzzed. Emma? Mom? Can you come get us? For the first time in months, I smiled. Real justice, I'd learned, wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. About rebuilding what was broken, not breaking others in return. I headed for my car, leaving the wreckage of Olivia's schemes behind. My children were waiting, and we had a new story to write. Together. Emma's play opened to a packed auditorium. I sat in the front row, watching my daughter shine under the stage lights, her voice carrying Shakespeare's words with newfound confidence. Mason sat beside me, his anger softened by time and truth. The empty seat between us spoke volumes. Backstage after the show, Emma hugged me tight. Did you see? I didn't mess up a single line. You were perfect. I smoothed her hair, still damp from the stage makeup she'd already removed. Dad's here. Mason's voice was neutral, a hard-won achievement. In the back. I turned. Caleb stood awkwardly by the exit, holding flowers and looking smaller somehow. The corporate titan reduced to a father seeking permission to approach his children. Emma's grip on my arm tightened. Should I? Your choice, I said. Always your choice. She hesitated, then walked over. Their conversation was brief, stilted, but real. No Olivia hovering nearby, no lawyers measuring every word, just a father trying to rebuild what his choices had broken. My phone buzzed. Janet Morton. Olivia took the plea deal, testifying against her uncle. Thought you should know. Another message followed. James would be proud of what we did. All of us. I watched Emma accept the flowers from Caleb, Mason keeping careful distance but nodding when his father spoke. The wounds were still there, but they were healing clean now. No infection of lies festering beneath. Aurora. Caleb approached while the kids gathered Emma's things. I signed the house over. The papers came today. Keep it. The words surprised us both. We've made our own home. I never meant... He stopped, started again. The board offered me a position in the Singapore office. Understanding dawned. When do you leave? Next month. He looked at our children, his voice rough. I'll fly back for holidays, school events, if they want me to. Distance might help. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close to peace. The stage crew began shutting down lights. Emma and Mason returned, their body language saying they'd heard. Singapore? Mason's jaw tightened. It's okay, Emma said quietly. Sometimes space helps people find their way back. Caleb's eyes glistened. When did you get so wise? When I had to. She hugged him briefly. Good luck, Dad. We walked out together, an almost family navigating new boundaries. In the parking lot, Caleb stopped. I keep thinking about that dinner, he said. The roasted potatoes, they were perfect. They always were. I took my children's hands. Goodbye, Caleb. He nodded, understanding the finality. Not of our connection. We'd always be connected through our children, but of what was lost. What he'd traded for ambition and flattery. At home, Emma placed her flowers in a vase while Mason ordered celebration pizza. I stood in our small kitchen, watching them move with the easy familiarity of healing hearts. My phone lit up one last time. An email from Marcus Chen. Got my kids back. Joint custody. Thank you. I smiled, remembering Janet's words about James being proud. But it wasn't just James who would be proud. I was proud. Of my children's resilience, of the truth-tellers who stood together, of myself. Mom? Emma called from the living room. Will you help me run lines for the spring play? What's the show? I joined them on the couch. The Tempest. It's about forgiveness. She paused. And letting go. Mason grabbed the pizza menu. And revenge. No. I touched the script in Emma's hands. It's about choosing what kind of story you want to write. About finding power in truth, not destruction. Is that what we did? Emma asked softly. I looked at my children, at our small apartment filled with more love than our big house ever held, at the future stretching before us, uncertain but ours. We did something better, I said. We chose to write our own story, together. Outside, the city hummed with other stories unfolding, other truths waiting to be told. But here, in this moment, our truth was enough. It always had been.
My name's Anna. I work as an economist for a big firm in the city. Numbers have always been my thing, but personal equations? Those I figured out the hard way. Life was on a predictable track until Mom got sick. It was just her and me after Dad passed away when I was a teenager. She was more than just a mom, she was my rock. When she got diagnosed with a condition that needed full-time care, I did the only thing that made sense. I sold her cozy house and moved her into a top-notch nursing home. The kind of place with gardens, 24-hour care, and even a piano in the lounge where she used to play her favorite tunes. It cost a fortune, but seeing her smile, playing those keys like she was young again, made every penny worth it. I remember one evening, after a long day of crunching numbers and balancing budgets, my boss, Lucy, dragged me to this party. Lucy's the head honcho at our firm, and despite her tough exterior, she's been my pillar through thick and thin. "Come on, Anna, you need to let your hair down every once in a while," she had said, her arm slung over my shoulder as we walked into the loud, crowded room. I was fumbling with my purse when I bumped into him, Ethan. He was all charm, from his crooked smile to his sparkly eyes. "Sorry, didn't see you there," he chuckled, handing me back my purse, which had landed at his feet. "It's all right, happens to the best of us," I replied, trying not to get lost in his deep blue eyes. As the evening rolled on, it turned out Ethan was the friend of a friend, and we got talking about everything from work to our favorite old movies. Turns out we both had a soft spot for old school jazz and spaghetti westerns. Lucy and I both took a liking to him, but it was clear Ethan had eyes only for me. Lucy noticed, but she was cool about it. After he asked me out, she pulled me aside, her drink in hand. "He's cute, but if he messes with you, I'll kick his ass," she half-joked in her usual no-nonsense manner. Ethan and I started dating soon after. It was all dinners, long walks, and nights spent talking about everything under the stars. He was different, kind, attentive, and he made me laugh. God, did I laugh during those first few months. Lucy stayed my rock, supporting me through my mom's worsening health, and my whirlwind romance with Ethan. When Ethan proposed, it was Lucy who helped me pick the dress, set up the venue, and even calmed my nerves right before I walked down the aisle. Married life kicked off like a dream. We'd wake up late on weekends, brew strong coffee, and talk about our future. And like any newlywed couple, we had our hearts set on finding the perfect nest, our own little corner in this big, bustling city. We spent countless Sundays driving around, peering at for sale signs, and dragging ourselves through endless open houses. The thrill of the hunt was real, but so was the sticker shock. I still remember Ethan's face the first time we looked at a house within our budget. $300,000 for this? Are they out of their minds? He blurted out as we toured a particularly cramped two-bedroom that looked more like a rundown shack than a cozy love nest. Maybe we're rushing into this. We could save up a bit more, give it another year or two. His words made sense, and honestly, the pressure to find a house right away was eating at me too. "Yeah, maybe you're right. No need to rush. We've got plenty of time," I agreed, squeezing his hand. So, we put the house hunt on pause. It seemed like the sensible thing to do, and life went on. But things shifted when my mom passed. It was sudden, a call in the middle of the night that left me scrambling to get to her side, only to arrive too late. Losing her was like losing my anchor, and in the weeks that followed, I walked around in a daze. Ethan was there, though, holding me at night while I cried, making sure I ate something, even if it was just toast. One evening, as I was sorting through some of Mom's papers, I found documents from the nursing home about the remaining funds. It was a hefty sum, parked quietly in a savings account, around $200,000. I hadn't thought about it much, with everything going on. Ethan was in the kitchen when I told him. His reaction was, off. "Wow, that's a lot of money, babe. You know, that could buy us a house outright. No more mortgage worries," he said, a little too quickly, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I remember frowning, feeling a twinge in my gut. "Yeah, maybe," I muttered, folding up the paper. "But let's think about it, okay? It's all pretty fresh." Sure, he replied, but there was a note in his voice that I couldn't place. Something that made me watch him a little more closely as he turned back to chopping vegetables, his knife tapping rhythmically against the cutting board. After what felt like an eternity of house hunting and countless discussions, Ethan and I finally bought our dream home. We settled on a charming little place not too far from the city center, but still with enough backyard space for maybe a dog or two down the line. We did it, babe, I said to Ethan as we stood in our new living room, boxes stacked around us waiting to be unpacked. Yeah, we did, he smiled, wrapping his arms around me. This is all ours. The house quickly turned into a project of love. We painted, decorated, and turned it into a home. Our weekends were filled with trips to furniture stores and discussions over coffee about which curtains matched the living room decor better. It was exhausting, but thrilling. A couple of months into our new homeowner bliss, Ethan suggested we visit his mom for dinner. It's been a while, and she keeps asking about the house, he said one morning, looking up from his phone. I had only met his mom a few times. She lived on the outskirts of a small village, surrounded by forests and fields. Her house, much like her lifestyle, was quaint but cluttered with jars of herbs and tinctures. She was a firm believer in natural remedies and often boasted about curing a cold with nothing but a special tea or a concoction of her own making. When we arrived, the aroma of something herbal wafted through the air. Ethan's mom, Martha, greeted us warmly but looked a bit pale. Oh, I've just been feeling under the weather, she explained as she led us into the kitchen where dinner was laid out. Have you seen a doctor? I asked, concerned, as we settled around the table. Martha scoffed, shaking her head vigorously. No, I don't trust those doctors. I've got my own remedies. She gestured towards the countless jars lining the shelves. During dinner, Martha's cough seemed to worsen, and she casually mentioned, You know, Anna, maybe you could stay for a few days, help me out around here with some things? I was caught off guard. Oh, Martha, I wish I could, but work is slammed right now. We just took on a big project, and I can't really take any time off, I explained, trying to keep my tone gentle. Maybe you should do what my mom did? Martha's eyes narrowed a bit. I remember you put your mother in a nursing home, she said abruptly. Maybe that's what you think I need too. I felt a stab of pain at the mention of my mom. It was the best option for her, Martha. She needed professional care that I couldn't provide at home. Martha shook her head, dismissing my explanation. I would never let strangers take care of me. I'll stick to my herbs and tinctures, she declared, gesturing defiantly at her collection. The rest of the dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. Ethan didn't say much, and I felt the tension thickening. As we drove home, I tried to break the ice. Ethan, I didn't mean to upset your mom. It's just... He cut me off, his voice cold. Maybe you could have been a bit more understanding, Anna. She's old school, you know how she is. When Ethan and I walked through the door of our home that night, the silence was deafening. The drive had been icy cold, the kind of silence that weighs down every word before it can be spoken. We both knew something had shifted, and not for the better. As I hung up my coat, Ethan finally broke the silence. Anna, do you even love me? His voice was a mix of frustration and disbelief. I turned, startled by his question. What? Of course, I do. Why would you even ask that? He paced a bit before stopping in front of me, his eyes searching mine. Because you wouldn't stay to help my mom. If you loved me, you'd care about my family too. I was taken aback. Ethan, I do care. I've always supported your relationship with your mom. But I can't just drop everything, Anne. And what? Lie there? He snapped. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're not willing to make sacrifices. His words hung in the air, and I could feel the tension spike. Then, he added something that rocked me to my core. Maybe I was wrong about us. If you can't support me with this, maybe we shouldn't be together. I was speechless, my mind racing. This was not the man I married. The man I loved was understanding, compassionate. Not the stranger making ultimatums. With nowhere else to turn, I called Lucy. Her phone rang a couple of times before she picked up. Hey, Anna, everything okay? I poured out everything, from the dinner with Martha to Ethan's harsh words and the looming threat of divorce. Lucy listened quietly, only interjecting to clarify a point or two. After I finished, she was silent for a moment. Then, that's rough, Anna. But you know what? You did what you could. You can't just upend your life because Ethan or his mom expects you to. And threatening divorce? That's manipulative, Anna. You see that, right? Talk to him when things have cooled off. The next few weeks were tough. Ethan became more withdrawn, barely helping around the house, always buried in his phone or out for long walks alone. Whenever his mom called, he'd put her on speakerphone, ensuring I heard every complaint about her health and how she was sure she'd die without our help. Each call ended with a significant look in my direction, a silent accusation. Anna, please, think about it. I'm not getting any better. Martha would plead, her voice loud and clear from the speaker. Ethan would glance over at me, his eyes hard. You hear that, Anna? She needs us. But I couldn't bring myself to give in, not like this, not with guilt as the driving force. I knew I had to stand my ground, but with each passing day, the gap between Ethan and me widened, filled with unsaid words and unresolved tensions. 2 weeks later, Lucy and I were at our favorite cafe, a little spot we'd often escape to during work breaks. The noise of the city faded as we sipped our coffee and delved into our worlds, hers, the office, mine, increasingly tangled and dark. So, what's up? Lucy asked, her eyebrows knitting together as she noticed my distracted look. I stirred my coffee, the sugar dissolving like the last bits of my patience. It's Ethan and his mom. Things are getting weird, Lucy. More than just the usual family drama. Lucy leaned in, her interest piqued. Weird how? What's he doing? He's pushing really hard for me to move in with his mom, like, obsessively. And he's been weirdly secretive. Something's off, I said, feeling the weight of my words. Lucy's face hardened. You think he's up to something? Anna, you might want to check this out properly. Maybe hire a private detective? See what he's really up to. 2 days later, I met with a detective, a gruff man with sharp eyes, named Mike. I explained everything, how Ethan's behavior had shifted, his sudden insistence on his mother's house. Mike listened, jotting down notes. We'll see what we can dig up. It does sound like he's hiding something. Give me a couple of weeks. Those weeks were long. Each day, Ethan's coldness turned our home into a silent battleground. His calls with his mom were now daily serenades of guilt and manipulation, always on speaker. Then, the call I was waiting for came. Anna, we need to talk. Mike's voice was grave, even over the phone. We met at the same cafe where I had confided in Lucy. Mike laid his findings out like a deck of cards, each one worse than the last. Your husband's in deep trouble at work. He's on the verge of being fired because of some shady deals. And there's more, he's racked up a heap of debt, all under your radar. Mike started, his eyes never leaving mine. My heart sank. Debts? How much are we talking about? Enough that he's desperate. He's taken out loans against his future earnings, maxed out credit cards, the works. But here's the kicker. Mike paused, sliding a recording device across the table. I stared at it, my hands trembling as I pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the cafe, mingled with his mother's croaky whispers. Once Anna moves in here and I get her to transfer her assets, we can handle everything. Her money will cover it all. Ethan's voice was cold, calculated. I stopped the recording, nausea rolling in my stomach. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word for this. Mike's next words were a blur as he advised me to get legal protection. See a lawyer, lock down your accounts. Fast. The next day, I met with a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Janet who specialized in family law. We'll start by securing your accounts. Then, we'll discuss your options regarding your marriage. As I left her office, a plan forming, I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. Relief that I was taking steps to protect myself, and devastation that the man I loved, the man I had married, was a stranger. It was a week of sleepless nights and distracted days at work. The phone rang, startling me from a report I'd been staring at for far too long. It was Lucy. Her voice was urgent. Anna, can you come to my office? Now. We need to talk. A chill ran down my spine. Sure, I'll be right there, I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. Lucy's tone had been serious, more than usual. I made my way to her office, my stomach tightening with every step. As soon as I walked in, Lucy shut the door and gestured for me to sit. She looked grave, her usual playful demeanor gone. Anna, there's something you need to hear, she began, her voice low. Ethan has been calling me. A lot. He's been making advances. He told me he made a mistake, that he should have chosen me, not you. My heart pounded painfully. What? Lucy, what are you talking about? She held up her hand, stopping my barrage of questions. I recorded one of our conversations. You need to hear this yourself. She pulled out her phone, found a file, and pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room, smooth and conniving. Lucy, you know I've always liked you. If only I'd made the right choice back then. But it's not too late. We could fix that. My breath hitched as I listened, each word a dagger. But worse was yet to come. I need a favor, Ethan continued on the recording. Could you find a reason to let Anna go? Fire her. Once she's out of work, I can convince her to move in with my mom. Manage her finances, you know? Then there's nothing stopping us. Just think about it. Just us, together. I sat there, numb, as the recording ended. Lucy's face was a mask of fury and disgust. I played along, Anna. To see how far he'd go. He actually thought I was on his side, she explained, her voice thick with anger. Why would he want me to move in with his mom so badly? I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Lucy shrugged, her lips pressed into a thin line. I don't know, Anna, but it's clear he's planning something sinister. You've got to be careful. Find out what he's really up to. I nodded, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and confusion. I will. I just need to think about how to handle this. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together, Lucy said, her hand reaching across the desk to squeeze mine. I left her office with a heavy heart. Ethan's betrayal was deeper and more twisted than I could have imagined. All this time, his plans, his deception, it was overwhelming. That evening, as I sat across from Ethan at dinner, watching him pretend like nothing was amiss, I felt like I was seeing him for the first time. After dinner, I retreated to our bedroom under the guise of needing an early night. Instead, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, plotting my next move. My thoughts kept circling back to one thing: why was it so important for Ethan to get me to his mother's house? What was the ultimate gain? Driving to Martha's house felt different this time. As we pulled up, she greeted us at the door, leaning heavily on her walking stick. Her pale face broke into a strained smile. Oh, Ethan, Anna, it's so good to see you both. I really could use some help around here. I barely manage to get around these days. Ethan shot me a look, his eyes pleading for me to say something supportive. I nodded slightly, swallowing my apprehension. I'm sorry to hear that, Martha. It must be tough. As we settled into the uncomfortable familiarity of the living room, with its shelves of dusty books and jars of herbs, Martha's complaints grew more frequent. She lamented her inability to even venture into her beloved garden. Maybe a short walk might help? If you're up for it, I could help you to the garden, I suggested, watching her closely. Oh, that would be lovely, dear, Martha beamed. I just need to grab a sweater from the car. It's a bit chilly today, I said, excusing myself. Once outside, I quickly pulled out my phone, activated the dictaphone app, and slipped it into my pocket. My hands shook as I headed back, knowing that whatever was about to unfold would change everything. I helped Martha to her feet, and we slowly made our way to the garden. I'll be right back, just going to the bathroom, I murmured to Ethan, detouring back inside. Instead of heading to the bathroom, I tucked myself away in a small alcove near the living room, out of sight but within earshot. Their voices were low but clear, and what I heard froze my blood. Everything's almost ready, Mom. Just a bit longer, and I'll bring Anna here for a visit, Ethan said, his tone disturbingly casual. Martha's response was a chilling giggle. I prepared everything, dear. Those special herbs I told you about? They'll do the trick. No one will suspect a thing once she starts drinking them. Ethan laughed, a sound that twisted my stomach. And then it's just us. We can finally use her money to clear my debts and more. Martha's voice was greedy as she replied, yes, yes, and you'll inherit everything after she's gone. Just make sure she stays here long enough. I waited, my heart pounding, until their voices faded, discussing mundane plans about the garden. Stepping quietly from my hiding spot, I rejoined them outside as if nothing had happened. Shall we go back inside? It looks like it might rain, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The ride home was a silent nightmare. As soon as we reached home, I mumbled an excuse about feeling unwell and needing to rest. Alone in the safety of our bedroom, I replayed the recording, each word confirming the horrifying truth. The next evening, I walked through the door of our house, my emotions a whirlwind of staged anger and hidden fear. Ethan was in the living room, idly flipping through a magazine. Slamming my bag onto the sofa, I let out a controlled breath to simulate distress. Can you believe it, Ethan? Lucy just fired me. No warning, nothing, just out of the blue. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes widening, not with concern, but an unmistakable glint of satisfaction. Fired? Well, that's unexpected. But, Anna, maybe it's for the best. Now there's nothing keeping you here. You can move in with my mom. You know she needs you. The raw shock I feigned masked my boiling anger. Move in with your mom? Are you serious? After everything, that's what you suggest. I shot back, my voice rising in controlled indignation. Ethan stood, his expression hardening as he approached me. Yes, I am serious. If you cared at all, you'd do this. And if you won't, maybe we shouldn't be together. Maybe a divorce will make you change your mind. His words were the cue I needed. With a grim smile, I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag, their crisp edges a symbol of my newfound resolve. Funny you should mention that, I said, handing them to him. I've been thinking the same thing. Ethan's face went white, but the next second, he came towards me with a menacing grimace on his face. Just then, the door swung open. Lucy and Janet, my lawyer, stepped in, their timing perfect. Ethan recoiled as if struck, the realization dawning on him that his game was up. Janet stepped forward, her presence commanding. Ethan, you can make this easy. Sign the papers, give up claims on the house and your joint savings, walk away, and we won't press charges for what you and your mother planned. We have recordings as evidence. Ethan looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting from my face to Lucy's and then back to the lawyer. Recordings, he stammered, his voice barely a croak. What recordings? The recordings of your conversations with your mother, Martha Miller, the lawyer clarified, her voice devoid of emotion. Conversations that clearly outline your plan to poison Mrs. Anna Miller and inherit her assets. A strangled gasp escaped Ethan's lips. His defiance crumbled, the bluster draining from him as he looked between the three of us. With a shaky hand, he signed the papers, his future, our shared past, disintegrating with each stroke of the pen. Good choice, Janet said, her voice cool as she collected the documents. You'll find it's much easier this way. Lucy approached me, her hand on my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I think I will be, I replied, watching as Ethan's figure shrank, his plans and plots reduced to nothing more than memories and warnings. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's world unraveled further. Fired from his job due to the shady dealings, burdened by debts, he was forced to sell his mother's house just to stay afloat. They ended up in a rented apartment, a stark contrast to the life he had plotted to steal from me. As for me, I remained in the house that was once ours, now solely mine. Lucy and I, our friendship solidified by the ordeal, often sat in my garden, talking about everything and nothing. Life had thrown me into the depths, but I had emerged, not just surviving, but thriving. I'm Lana. I'd been the woman of the house since I was 12 when Mom passed. Dad did his best, but with little Jack needing so much, I stepped up big time. I never made it to college. Money was always tight, and dreams had to wait. Instead, I dove headfirst into work straight out of high school, landing a gig at a small ad agency. Jack's the brainy one, clever as they come. I scrimped and saved every dime I could to get him through college. He graduated top of his class, landed a job at some fancy trading company, and shot up the ranks like a rocket. Tonight, though, wasn't about Jack or bills or work. Tonight was about letting loose for once. My best friend, Mia, dragged me out to this swanky party downtown, said I needed to unplug and unwind. So here I was, squeezed into a dress I last wore when I thought low-rise jeans were a good idea, nursing a drink and feeling out of place among the glittering crowd. Mia was off mingling, leaving me leaning against a wall, scanning the room. That's when I saw him, Lucas. He stood out, not just because he was ridiculously handsome, with that annoyingly perfect hair, but because he laughed like he meant it, eyes crinkling, head thrown back. Way out of my league, right? But life's funny sometimes. He caught me staring, smiled, and walked over. My heart did a weird flip. "Hi, I'm Lucas. I couldn't help but notice you from across the room," he said, voice smooth like he practiced it. I blinked, words stuck somewhere between my brain and my mouth. Lana. Hi. Enjoying the party, Lana?" His eyes twinkled with genuine curiosity, not the bored politeness you'd expect at these things. "Ah, it's all right. Not really my scene, you know? Too many ties and high heels," I muttered, feeling my cheeks heat up. He laughed, and it was like a warm blanket on a cold night. "I hear you. I'm about ready to ditch the tie myself." "So, what do you do when you're not critiquing fashion choices at fancy parties?" "Advertising. Well, more like wrangling ads and hoping people click on M more than they ignore M," I said, warming up to his easy demeanor. "Sounds like a challenge. I'm in software myself. And speaking of challenges, how about we challenge each other to a dance? This party could use a little livening up," he offered, hand outstretched. The music was some kind of jazz electronic fusion, the beat just right. We moved awkwardly at first, but soon found a rhythm. By the end of the song, I was laughing, breathless, and surprised at how much fun I was having. As the party wrapped up, Lucas leaned in. "Could I see you again? Maybe somewhere less sparkly?" "Sure," I blurted out, surprised at my own boldness. "I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, and he flashed me another heart-stopping smile, before disappearing into the night. Walking home later, under the streetlights with the city quiet around me, I couldn't help but think maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. Since that party, me and Lucas had been pretty much inseparable. It felt like we'd known each other for ages, not just a few months. We'd go out for cheap eats, walk around the park, or just hang at my place, talking till it was way past decent bedtime hours. Lucas had this way of making everything seem interesting. It was a chilly Saturday when he said, "Hey, let's go for a drive." "Sure, where to?" I asked, pulling on my oldest, comfiest sneakers. "It's a surprise. Trust me, you'll like it," he winked, that grin plastered on his face that told me trouble in the best way possible. We drove out of the city, the buildings shrinking behind us. After about an hour, we ended up at this little lookout spot overlooking the river. The sun was just setting, turning the sky all sorts of crazy beautiful colors. Lucas led me to a secluded spot, pulled out a blanket from his car, and we just sat there, watching the light fade. "You know, Lana, these past months with you, they've been the best," he started, his voice more serious than usual. "I love being with you. You make everything better, and I can't imagine not having this, not having you." I didn't know what to say. I mean, I felt it too, but hearing it? That was something else. "Lucas, Before I could finish, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. My heart skipped about a dozen beats. "Lana, will you marry me?" he asked, opening the box to reveal a ring that sparkled even in the fading light. I stared at him, then at the ring, and all I could think was how this wasn't my world. Fancy rings, proposals at sunset, that was stuff for other people, not me. But looking at Lucas, seeing him all nervous and hopeful, I realized that maybe, just maybe, it could be my world too. Yes, Lucas. Of course, yes. I laughed, the sound bubbly and a bit hysterical, even to my own ears. He slid the ring on my finger, and we hugged, the world spinning around us like one of those cheesy movie scenes. But it didn't matter. It was real, it was ours, and it was just the beginning. Or so I thought. When we got back to my place, I called Jack first thing. Jack, you're not gonna believe this. What? What's up? His voice was alert, ready for anything. Lucas proposed. There was a pause, then. He what? Holy, are you serious? As serious as I can be. I'm getting married, Jack. Oh, Lana, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you. Lucas is a great guy. You two are gonna be amazing together. Thanks, Jack. I think so too, I said, a smile so wide my face hurt. We talked a bit more, but I could tell Jack was genuinely stoked for me. It felt good, having my little brother's blessing. It was supposed to be just dinner, but standing at the doorstep of Lucas's parents' house, it felt more like I was gearing up for battle. His mother, Mrs. Aldridge, answered the door with a plastered smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lana, finally we meet, she said, her tone cool. Lucas has told us so little about you. I tried to smile, brushing off the chill her words left. Thank you for having me, Mrs. Aldridge. Oh, please, call me Diane, she insisted, but her voice was stiff, formal. The house was immaculate, like something out of a home decor magazine, and it made me self-conscious of every speck of dust I might have carried in. We moved into the living room where Mr. Aldridge was already seated, looking up from his newspaper with a scrutinizing gaze. So, you're the girl who's stolen my son's heart, he remarked, not unkindly. I nodded, managing a small yes, sir, before settling into an armchair Lucas pointed out, feeling it swallow me whole. Diane didn't waste any time. As soon as we were seated, she began her interrogation, her questions sharp and her curiosity seeming more like an investigation. Lana, Lucas mentioned you grew up locally. Tell me about your family. I cleared my throat, feeling Lucas's tense gaze on me. Well, it's just been me, my dad, and my younger brother for a long time. My mom passed away when I was young. Diane's eyebrows rose slightly, and she exchanged a quick, unreadable look with her husband. I see. And without a mother, how did you manage the finer aspects of becoming a lady? Her question stung, its implication clear, but I kept my composure. My dad did his best, and I learned to handle things myself. It made me independent, strong. Diane murmured, glancing up as if assessing this information. She then continued, and your education? Lucas mentioned you didn't go to college? I nodded, feeling the old familiar pang of inadequacy. Yes, I went straight into work after high school. I built a career in advertising from the ground up. Diane's smile thinned. Fascinating. And here I thought Lucas would marry a woman of educational standing. Her tone was polite, but the underlying criticism was palpable. Diane turned to call for a servant. A glass of water, please. She turned back to me, popping a pill into her mouth as soon as the water was handed to her. I sometimes need a little something to help me digest, surprises. The dinner progressed painfully. Each course served was like another round in an unspoken contest I didn't sign up for. Lucas tried to change the topic to lighter subjects, but his attempts fell flat as his father suddenly dropped a bombshell. Tell me, Lana, Mr. Aldridge said, his voice carrying across the table. Is there perhaps another reason for this rushed engagement? You aren't expecting, are you? My face heated up at the blunt question. No, sir, I replied, my voice a mix of shock and indignation. It's not like that at all. As dinner wrapped up, I felt defeated, the weight of their judgments pressing down on me. I looked to Lucas for support, but he was preoccupied, his attention more on his phone than the conversation. It hurt, seeing him so detached when I needed him most. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of appointments, decisions, and constant second-guessing, mostly thanks to Diane. She had a knack for making the simplest choices feel like life or death decisions. Jack was my rock through all of it, always ready to lend an ear or a hand. Jack and I were in the middle of discussing table settings one afternoon when I got a call from her. I put her on speaker so Jack could listen in, a grimace forming on my face as I braced for the onslaught. "Lana, are you sure you want to go with these colors? I mean, they're a bit, well, plain, don't you think?" Diane's voice would always drip with a blend of disdain and false concern. "Diane, we thought these colors were neutral. Elegant." I tried to defend our choice, but my voice wavered under her scrutinizing tone. "Darling, neutral is just another word for boring. Remember, this wedding isn't just about you, it's about our family too. We have a reputation to uphold," Diane responded sharply. Jack rolled his eyes, mouthing, "Here we go again," as he listened. Frustrated, I suggested, "What about adding some brighter accents? Maybe some red napkins? They could really pop against the white tablecloths." There was a pause on the line. "Red? Are you serious? That's the epitome of tacky, Lana. Red is so garish. It's completely out of the question." Diane shot down the idea instantly. Yet, just a week later, at a meeting with the venue's event coordinator, Diane did a complete 180. "You know what would really stand out? Red napkins, and oh, let's not forget red flower vases for each table," she exclaimed with a flourish, as if it were her idea all along. I sat there, stunned, exchanging a bewildered look with the coordinator who seemed just as confused. Jack, who had tagged along, snickered under his breath. "She's unbelievable. Did you not say last week that red was tacky?" I couldn't help but confront her as politely as I could manage. Diane waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I meant it's tacky if not done properly. But I trust this lovely lady to handle it with class," she cooed at the coordinator, completely ignoring my input. Later, I vented to Lucas about his mother's contradictory and controlling behavior. "She's driving me insane, Lucas. It's like she's doing this on purpose. Last week, red was tacky, and now it's her brilliant idea?" Lucas sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Lana, that's just how they are. They're set in their ways. We can't change them. You know how my mom likes to take charge. Maybe it's easier if we just let her have this one." I was flabbergasted. "Easier for who, Lucas? This is our wedding, not just a party she's throwing." He didn't have an answer for that, just a shrug and a helpless look that said he was as caught in the middle as I felt. The morning of my wedding, the air buzzed with a mixture of excitement and nerves. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate lace of my dress, the fabric falling perfectly just how I'd always imagined. My dad knocked gently on the door, poking his head in. "Ready, Lana?" he asked, his eyes misty. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my dress one last time. "As I'll ever be, Dad." He offered his arm, and I took it, feeling the weight of the moment settle over me. We walked together, the sound of our steps mingling with the soft music that filled the air. As we emerged, the sight of friends and family all turned to watch us approach filled me with a warmth I hadn't expected. My dad squeezed my hand as we walked, his presence a calming force. Approaching the altar, my heart skipped a beat, but not just from seeing Lucas waiting there. His mother, Diane, was dressed entirely in black, her outfit more suited to a funeral than a wedding, complete with a large hat covered by a black veil. It was a shock, a stark contrast to the sea of cheerful colors around her. I glanced at Lucas, searching for some sign of reaction, but he stood there, stoic and seemingly oblivious to the absurdity of his mother's attire. We reached the altar, and Dad handed me over to Lucas with a tearful smile. I hugged him tightly, whispering a thank you that caught in my throat as emotions threatened to spill over. The ceremony proceeded, and it came time for the speeches. I took a deep breath, turning to address the gathering, my hands shaking slightly as I held my notes. I want to start by thanking my dad, I began, my voice strong, despite the shaking. Dad, you raised Jack and me on your own, sacrificing so much to give us a life full of love and laughter. You taught us the value of hard work and the importance of sticking together. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and I saw Dad wiping away tears, his chest swelling with pride. I also want to thank Lucas's parents, Diane and Michael, for raising such a wonderful man, I continued, turning towards them with a respectful nod. Lucas is kind, intelligent, and caring, qualities that are a direct reflection of both of you. As I spoke these words, Diane's sobbing became louder, her cries theatrical as she lamented. Today is a day of mourning. I have lost my son to this unworthy woman. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, the tension thick in the air. Lucas, face flushing red, stepped up to speak next, his mother's sobs still echoing around us. I want to thank my parents for everything, Lucas began, his voice steady but his eyes avoiding mine. For your love, your guidance, and your unwavering support. As he continued, I felt a pang of hurt. He didn't mention my dad, not even a nod to his efforts or the bond we shared. Leaning closer, I whispered to Lucas, "You might want to thank my father too. It's only polite." Lucas barely glanced my way. His omission stung, a sharp reminder of the divides between our families, and the support I felt slipping away. A moment later, Diane, clad in her dark attire, rose from her seat with a flourish. The chatter around the room hushed as all eyes turned to her. She cleared her throat dramatically, holding up several sheets of paper. "I have something I must say to the bride," she announced, her voice piercing the tense silence. Everyone, including me, froze. It wasn't customary for the groom's mother to make such a speech, but there she was, stepping forward, a determined look in her eye. "Since meeting Lana," Diane began, her voice thick with emotion, "I have undergone considerable stress. The shock has been so severe that I've incurred expenses for psychological consultations and medication." The crowd murmured, some in sympathy, others in disbelief. She continued, "Therefore, I demand compensation for the emotional damage caused by this union." Diane then produced a document and a sleek pen from her purse, thrusting them towards me. "I require that you, Lana, sign a contract to pay us $7,000 monthly for a year to cover these costs." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I stared at her, my heart pounding, and then turned to Lucas, searching his face for any sign of objection. But instead, he nodded in agreement with his mother. "Lana, you need to respect the new family rules," Lucas stated loudly, enough for everyone to hear. "Please sign the document." I felt like I was in a nightmare, my legs rooted to the spot. Before I could process the humiliation, Jack, who had been a silent spectator until now, stood up and strode towards me. His face was set, his jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous." Jack's voice boomed across the hall. He snatched the document and pen from Diane's hands and tossed them onto a nearby table. "I won't let anyone treat my sister this way." He turned to address the crowd, his voice filled with passion. "Everyone, I thank you for being here on what should have been a joyous occasion. But I cannot stand by and watch as my sister is insulted and demeaned." Jack paused, his gaze sweeping over the guests, then landing on me with softness. "Lana sacrificed her education for me. She worked to ensure I could succeed, and today, I plan to thank her by gifting the newlyweds an apartment and sending my new in-laws on a world trip." The murmurs grew louder, a mix of shock and support bubbling in the room. However, Jack's voice grew stern. "Seeing how they've treated her, I can't allow this marriage to proceed. Lana deserves better." He stepped forward, placing a protective arm around my shoulders. "There will be no wedding today. Please, take your gifts and go home. The apartment and the trip will go to my sister, she deserves a vacation." The room erupted in applause, some guests standing to clap louder. The echoes of applause were still ringing in the hall when Mr. Thompson, the president of the company where my brother worked, stepped up to the altar. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Thompson began, his voice firm and carrying effortlessly, I'm here not just as a spectator but as someone who has seen firsthand the kind of character and dedication Lana has instilled in her brother, Jack. He nodded towards me, a serious look on his face. Turning to my father, he extended his hand, which Dad shook, overwhelmed by the unfolding events. "Sir, you've raised a remarkable daughter and a son who stands by his family with unwavering loyalty and integrity." The room filled with another round of subdued applause. Mr. Thompson then turned sharply towards Lucas, who was already looking quite shaken. "And now, to you, Lucas." Lucas's face was pale, his eyes darting nervously. "Lucas, I offered you a position in our company at the recommendation of Jack," Mr. Thompson continued, his tone hardening. "However, in light of today's revelations and your apparent lack of respect and support for your would-be wife, I must set new rules for our company. Effective immediately, I am withdrawing my offer of employment to you." The room gasped, the weight of his words not lost on anyone, especially not on Lucas, who staggered slightly as if he'd been physically hit. Lucas's mother burst into loud, wailing sobs. "This is all your fault," she screamed at me, pointing a trembling finger. "You've ruined my son's career." As the guests began to disperse, the atmosphere was thick with a mix of shock and support. Some approached to offer their condolences, others their congratulations for dodging a bullet. Lucas stood off to the side, his figure slumped, the realization of his losses sinking in. Jack, ever the protector, didn't leave my side. "Come on, Lana. Let's get you out of here and to your new apartment. You need a fresh start, away from all this drama." When we arrived at the apartment Jack had gifted me, I was taken aback by the modern layout and the comforting ambience. "Jack, this is amazing," I murmured, taking in the view from the large living room window. "It's all yours, Lana. No strings attached, no unfair compromises. Just a place where you can be yourself and figure out what you want next," Jack said, draping an arm around my shoulders. 3 months had whisked by since the day that should have tied me down, but instead set me free. Here I was, miles away from home, on a journey around the world with Dad and Jack, the very trip Jack intended for those who never deserved it. As our plane cut through the clouds toward our next destination, I couldn't help but feel the vast distance from everything that had tried to confine me. Jack nudged me as I stared out the window. "Thinking about how high we are, or just daydreaming about pastries from that Parisian cafe?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Honestly, just enjoying the distance from all the drama." The conversation drifted to lighter topics, laughter filling the spaces between us. But amidst the casual banter, my thoughts sometimes drifted back to Lucas and his mother. Word had it that Lucas turned into a pariah in the business world, doors slamming shut as his reputation tanked, thanks to his own actions and his mother's antics. And Diane, once a social butterfly, found herself shunned, her schemes and demands at the wedding reaching legendary status among her circles. It was a fitting end to their saga, one might think, but I seldom let my mind linger there. Instead, I focused on the journey. It was on a sandy beach in Thailand, watching the sunset paint the sky with strokes of orange and pink, when I met Alan. He was there with his little daughter, Mia, building a sandcastle near where Dad, Jack, and I were lounging. Mia came bounding over to us with a shell in her hand, offering it to me with a shy smile. "This is pretty, thank you. What's your name?" I asked her. "I'm Mia. That's my daddy." She pointed to Alan, who was now walking towards us, a friendly grin on his face. "Hope she's not bothering you," Alan said as he reached us, his voice warm. "Not at all," I replied, handing Mia back her shell. We were just admiring her shell collection. Alan sat down with us, and we started chatting. He was from Australia, a widower taking some time to travel the world with his daughter. As days turned into weeks, our paths crossed often, between guided tours and hotel stays. Alan and I found ourselves sharing stories over coffee while Mia and Jack concocted sandcastles and adventures. It was easy, comfortable, and something about him felt like home. One evening, as we watched the sunset, Alan turned to me. "Lana, I know this trip is a reset for you, but when we get back, would you want to maybe see where this could go?" I looked at him, at the honest hope in his eyes, and felt a surge of warmth. I'd like that, Alan. Let's see where it goes. As the trip neared its end, my heart was full. Not just from the adventures and the break from my past life, but from the possibility of a new beginning. With each country we left behind, I felt less of the old ties that bound me and more of the new connections that beckoned. So, there I was, Jenna, just cruising through the local park, headphones in, blaring some old school rock. The breeze was nice, and it was just one of those perfect days for being lost in your own world. I'd just wrapped up a coding sprint for the new app one was developing. Working from home has its perks, like no one cares if you're in your pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. As I was rounding the bend near the old oak tree, that's when it happened. Out of nowhere, I collided with what felt like a brick wall, sending my phone flying and ripping my headphones out. I barely had time to register the surprised yelp that matched mine. "Oh, crap. I'm so sorry," I blurted out, scrambling to my feet, brushing dirt off my jeans. The brick wall turned out to be a guy, probably around my age, with a shock of brown hair and a kind of sheepish grin that immediately put me at ease. He was already picking up my phone, checking if it was okay. "Hey, no harm done, but maybe watch where you're dancing next time." He chuckled, handing back my phone which, thank God, was still in one piece. "Thanks, and yeah, I guess I got carried away with the tunes. I'm Jenna, by the way," I said, still a bit embarrassed, but relieved he was cool about it. "I'm Jake. Seems like you've got a killer taste in music," Jake said, nodding towards my phone. We both laughed it off, and I noticed he was holding a frisbee. "You play?" I asked, gesturing to it. "Yeah, was just about to start a game with some friends, but they bailed." "You play?" "Not really, but there's a first time for everything, right?" I shrugged. It wasn't like I had plans, and he seemed like good company. "Cool, let me show you the ropes then." His smile was infectious, and honestly, I was already curious about him. We spent the next hour tossing the frisbee, chatting about everything from our favorite bands to our jobs. Turns out, Jake was an engineer at a local tech startup, which gave us tons to talk about since we were both in the tech field. It felt so easy, like chatting with an old friend. As the sun began to set, Jake glanced at his watch. "Hey, you hungry? I was gonna grab a bite at the cafe across the street. Join me?" I was actually starving, and I figured, why not? "Sure, let's go. But just a heads up, if they have chili fries, I'm not sharing," I warned him playfully. "Huh, challenge accepted. Let's see if their chili fries are worth the hype then," he said as we started walking towards the cafe. By the time we said goodbye, it was clear this wasn't going to be just a one-time thing. Jake asked for my number, and I gave it to him, feeling that buzz you get when you know something good just started. After a few months of dating Jake, things were going pretty damn well. But like every romantic movie where the sun's always shining, there had to be a cloud somewhere. That cloud, in my story, turned out to be Linda, Jake's mom. "So, you're finally going to meet my mom," Jake said one Saturday morning as we were having breakfast. He had this half-smile, half-wince thing going on. "Just a heads up, she's a bit intense." "Intense like how?" "Like secret government conspiracy intense or believes in aliens intense?" I joked, trying to lighten the mood. "More like reads your horoscope and judges your life choices intense," he replied, shaking his head. We drove over to Linda's house later that day. It was one of those perfectly manicured homes you see on TV shows, where you know something's too good to be true. Jake knocked, and the door swung open. There she was, Linda, in all her glory, wearing a flowery dress that screamed, "I'm the boss here." "Jakey, and you must be Jenna," Linda said, eyeing me like I was some specimen under a microscope. Come in, come in." The living room looked like it was ripped straight out of a 1950s home decor magazine, complete with a giant bookshelf filled with all sorts of astrology books. I kid you not, there was a crystal ball on the coffee table. Linda wasted no time. "So, Jenna, when's your birthday?" she asked, as soon as we sat down on her floral couch. April 17th, I said, a bit thrown off by the sudden interest in astrology. Aries, huh? She frowned, flipping through one of her many books. And Jakey here is a Pisces. Not the best match, astrologically speaking. You do know that, right? Jake rolled his eyes, giving me a sorry about this look. Mom, come on, not everyone believes in that stuff. But they should, especially when it comes to important life decisions. Linda shot back, giving me a sharp look. You see, Jenna, Aries are headstrong and impulsive, and Pisces are dreamers, sensitive. It can lead to conflicts, you know. I wasn't sure how to respond. I mean, who goes full psychic mode 5 minutes after meeting someone? Well, we've been getting along just fine so far, I managed to say, trying not to offend her but also standing my ground. Linda hummed disapprovingly, tapping her fingers on her astrology book. We'll see about that. Life's not just about the good times, dear. The rest of the visit was pretty awkward. Linda kept dropping hints about ensuring compatibility and watching out for the retrogrades. I couldn't believe the stuff coming out of her mouth. Jake was super apologetic on the drive home. Sorry about that. She can be a bit much, he admitted, looking genuinely embarrassed. A bit much? Jake, she basically said we're doomed because I'm an Aries, I said, trying to laugh it off, but honestly, it stung a bit. Driving back, I mulled over everything. Linda was definitely a force to be reckoned with, but I wasn't about to let her or her astrological charts dictate my relationship. I liked Jake a lot, and no amount of bad star alignment was going to change that. So there we were, a year into this whirlwind, and somehow, despite all the cosmic crap Linda tried to throw our way, Jake popped the question. We were at our favorite pizza spot. Jake got all nervous, which was funny because he's usually Mr. Cool. He slipped the ring box across the table right as I was about to dive into a slice. Jenna, will you marry me? He blurted out, almost knocking over his drink. I was so shocked I nearly choked on my pizza. Hell yes, I managed to get out once I stopped coughing. Everyone around us started clapping, and I was just there, all teary-eyed and laugh-crying. Planning the wedding, on the other hand, was anything but beautiful at first. Trying to make a guest list and figure out a venue was stressful enough without Linda's constant input. You know, Jenna, Mars is in retrograde around your wedding date. That's really not a good sign, Linda warned one afternoon, while we were looking over some flower arrangements at my place. I rolled my eyes so hard I thought they might stick that way. Linda, we're not picking a date based on Mars, Mercury, or any planet. We're picking it because the venue we want is available then, and it's special to us. The wedding day finally came, and despite Linda's dire predictions, it was perfect. Sunny skies, not too hot, not too cold. All our friends and family were there, laughing and having a good time. Even Linda managed to put on a smile, though it looked a bit forced. After the ceremony, during the reception, Linda pulled me aside. Her expression was serious, which wasn't surprising given our past chats. Jenna, I still think you should reconsider this union. You might be happy now, but what about when the stars shift? I had just about enough at this point. Linda, I'm married to your son now. I'm not reconsidering anything. We're happy, and that's what matters. She huffed a bit, looking around as if the answer was going to pop out from behind the wedding cake. You're ignoring the signs, Jenna. But remember, I warned you. Duly noted, Linda. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to dance with my husband at our wedding, which, by the way, is going wonderfully despite the bad signs. Jake caught my eye from across the room and gave me a thumbs up, knowing all too well the conversation I'd just survived. We spent the rest of the night dancing, laughing, and truly enjoying every moment. Life after the wedding felt like a sweet dream, but as with all dreams, reality has a way of creeping in. Linda's relentless comments were that reality for me. Every time we visited, she'd have some snarky comment ready. One Sunday afternoon, we were at her place for what I hoped would be a peaceful visit. No such luck. So, Jenna, Linda began as she served the tea, Still no good news on the baby front? You know, I read that some people are just cursed. Bad energy or something. I almost choked on my tea. Linda, really, that's not how it works. We've seen the doctor, everything's fine. These things take time. Time, huh? Or maybe it's just not meant to be. She shrugged, sipping her tea like she hadn't just suggested my uterus was cursed. I was fuming, but Jake squeezed my hand under the table, a silent plea to keep my cool. Changing the subject, I mentioned our latest big project. Actually, we've been house hunting. Found a great place, and we're thinking of putting down an offer. Linda perked up, her interest obviously piqued. A house, huh? And how are you affording that? Jake's doing well, but houses aren't cheap. I was proud of our independence and financial stability. Actually, I've been doing really well with the app development. We're putting in equal amounts. She scoffed, setting down her cup a little too hard. Well, isn't that convenient? Living off my son and now spending his money on a house. It's classic, really. We left soon after, but her words stung. It was the same old song, no matter how hard I worked or what I achieved. The house buying process was a breath of fresh air compared to dealing with Linda. We found a beautiful place, perfect for us, and moved in a couple of months later. I thought owning our new home would prove to Linda that I wasn't the gold digger she painted me to be. But instead, it just fueled her fire. At our housewarming, which Linda attended out of familial obligation more than anything, she pulled me aside while Jake was busy with other guests. Must be nice, living large on someone else's dime. But we both know the truth, don't we? Just make sure he doesn't find out about your little side flings, she hissed, glancing around to make sure no one else could hear. I stared at her, shocked and angry. What are you even talking about? I've never cheated on Jake, and I never would. How dare you? She just smirked and walked away, leaving me there, fuming. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Linda was spreading rumors about me being a freeloader and cheating on Jake. That was the last straw. I confronted Jake when we were alone. Your mom's saying things, awful things about me. I don't know how much more I can take. Jake was furious. She what? That's it. I'm going to have a word with her. This has to stop. He did, and he told Linda she needed to back off or she wouldn't be welcome in our home anymore. She didn't take it well and called me the next day, furious. You're trying to cut me off from my son, you witch. I know what you're up to, bringing men into the house when Jake's gone. Don't think I don't know. Her words were like venom, but they didn't hold any power over me anymore. Linda, believe what you want, but I'm telling you now, stop spreading lies about me, or you'll regret it. This is my home, and I won't be harassed in it. Things had quieted down since we limited Linda's visits, but calm in my life seems to be just the quiet before another storm. This new trouble started innocently enough, just a feeling that something was off. It began at the local grocery store. I was loading bags into the car when I got this prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching me. I glanced around and caught a glimpse of a man at the far end of the parking lot. He was just standing there, staring. It was weird, but I brushed it off as paranoia. The next sighting was at the cafe down the street from our house. The same man, sitting 2 tables away, pretending to read a newspaper, but clearly watching me. My heart started pounding. Was I being followed? When I saw him a third time, just standing across the street from our house, that's when I really freaked out. This was no coincidence. This guy was tracking me. I told Jake about it that night. Babe, there's this guy, I've seen him around a lot lately, and it feels like he's following me. Jake looked concerned, but he was trying to be the rational one. Are you sure? Maybe you're just overworked and stressed. Why don't you take a break for a few days? Do some of that yoga you love, chill out a bit? I wasn't convinced, but I decided maybe a break would help. I started doing yoga again, tried to meditate, but that nagging feeling wouldn't leave me. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. One afternoon, I had enough. I was going to prove I wasn't imagining things. I went to the same grocery store, and sure enough, there he was. This time I confronted him. I walked straight up to him, my phone camera ready. "Why are you following me? Who are you?" The man looked startled, then tried to walk away, but I was too quick. I snapped a few pictures. "I've called the cops," I lied. He stopped, a look of panic crossing his face. "Wait, listen, I'm not here to hurt you. I'm a private investigator." "I'm sorry, I can't say more." In the evening, we ran into him again in the parking lot of our house. Jake confronted him, grabbing him by the collar. "You better start talking, or I'm calling the cops right now." The man finally broke. "Look, I was hired by your mother. She wanted proof of infidelity. I swear, I didn't find anything, because there's nothing to find." Jake called Linda immediately. "Mom, what the hell are you doing? Hiring someone to spy on Jenna? Don't come to our house again. You're not welcome here anymore." The next day, Jake was all action. He had security cameras installed all around the house. "If she's pulling stunts like this, who knows what she'll do next," he said, anger lacing his every word. After all the drama with Linda and that creepy PI, Jake suggested something I couldn't have been happier about: a vacation. Just the two of us, away from all the chaos, somewhere I could breathe without feeling like someone was always watching. We ended up at this cozy little beach town, with nothing but the sound of waves and seagulls to keep us company. It was perfect. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could just sit, read a book under the sun, and not worry about secretive glances or hidden agendas. When we got back home, I was brimming with a sense of peace. That peace only grew when I discovered something incredible: I was pregnant. After years of trying and facing Linda's harsh words, it had finally happened. But with the joy came a wave of protectiveness. Given everything with Linda, the last thing I wanted was to put our little bubble of happiness at risk. So, we decided to keep the pregnancy under wraps, especially from Linda. "Let's just keep it between us and my folks for now," I told Jake, who was over the moon about the baby. "Yeah, I don't want my mom spoiling this with her negativity. We'll tell the world when we're ready," he agreed. Since I worked from home, hiding my growing belly wasn't as hard as it might have been. I swapped my fitted tees for looser shirts, and if I ever went out, I was all about those flowy dresses. But the thing was, my belly wasn't really showing that much. I was past my first trimester, yet there was barely a bump. I mentioned it to my doctor during one of my checkups, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. He gave me a reassuring smile. "Every woman's body is different, Jenna. Some show a lot, and some don't show much at all. As long as the scans are normal and the baby's healthy, you've got nothing to worry about." As the weeks rolled on, only Jake, my parents, and I knew about the little life growing inside me. It felt like our precious secret, a small miracle just for us. We'd sit in what would be the nursery, planning and dreaming about the future. "I think we should paint it yellow," Jake said one evening, looking around the room. "Yellow's nice. Bright and happy," I agreed, picturing our little one in their crib, the walls a sunny backdrop. This little bubble of joy was ours to cherish, and for now, that was all that mattered. Linda's shadow lingered at the edge of our happiness, but inside our home, within our little growing family, we were safe. 8 months in, and my pregnancy was now pretty obvious, no more hiding the baby bump. Jake and I decided it was time to celebrate with all our family and friends, even Linda. I figured maybe if she saw how real and beautiful this was, she might drop her vendetta. We threw a big bash at our place, decorating the backyard with lights and flowers. I felt like royalty, floating among our guests with Jake by my side, everyone so excited and happy for us. Well, almost everyone. Linda arrived late, her face stormy as ever. I braced myself for her usual antics, but hoped she'd keep it together for the sake of the day. No such luck. As I was mingling, I overheard her chatting, well, more like conspiring, with a group of relatives. "This is all a show," Linda hissed, not even bothering to lower her voice. Mark my words, she's not pregnant. It's just a ploy to bind Jake tighter and dig into his wallet more. Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her ruin this day. I approached her, smoothing down my dress, trying to keep my voice even. Linda, can we talk? She looked me up and down, skepticism written all over her face. What's there to talk about? You think you can fool everyone, but not me. I took a deep breath, keeping my cool. I'm really pregnant, Linda. There's a baby, our baby, Jake's and mine. Can't we put our differences aside, just for today, for the sake of the baby? She scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping her. You're unbelievable. Do you really think I'd fall for this charade? Frustrated but not wanting to cause a scene, I tried once more. Linda, please. It's a celebration. Let's just enjoy the day. She snorted, turning away from me and heading upstairs to the second floor of our house. I hesitated, then followed her, not wanting her to spread more poison among the guests. Upstairs, I found her in the hallway, fuming. Linda, why can't you just be happy for us? In a month, you'll see. There's a baby, a real baby. She whirled on me, her eyes cold. There is no baby. You're a con artist, Jenna. Always have been. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, tears pricking at the edges of my eyes. I don't know why you're doing this, but it's going to stop. Turning to leave, I started back down the stairs to the living room, eager to get away from her negativity. But as I took the first step, I felt a sharp shove from behind. My feet lost their grip, and I tumbled forward, the world turning upside down as I fell. The last thing I saw was the blur of the party decorations and the horrified faces of our guests, before everything went dark. When I finally came to, the harsh glare of hospital lights and the steady beep of monitors greeted me. I was disoriented, my body aching all over. I turned my head and saw Jake, sitting next to me, his face pale and drawn with worry. He immediately leaned closer, taking my hand. Jenna, thank God you're awake. How do you feel? Where's the baby? I asked, panic rising in my chest before I could even gauge my own pain. Jake's eyes were filled with concern, and he squeezed my hand tighter. They had to, they induced labor, to save him after your fall. He's on support, but he's fighting. Tears welled up in my eyes, and a sob choked me. Is he going to be okay? I managed to stammer between breaths. They're doing everything they can, Jake assured me, brushing a tear from my cheek. As I lay there, the memories of the fall flashed through my mind, the shock of being pushed, the terrifying tumble, Linda's face just before I turned to descend the stairs. Jake, I said, my voice firmer despite the fear. Linda pushed me. She did it. Jake's face contorted with confusion and distress. What? No, Jenna, it must have been an accident. It wasn't, I insisted, feeling a surge of frustration. Check the cameras. Please, just look. He nodded, standing up stiffly, his movements betraying his own fear and turmoil. After a few tense minutes, he returned, his face ghostly. I saw it, he said quietly. You were right. It's all there on the video. My mom pushed you. His next action was to call the police. I could only hear his side of the conversation, his words clipped, his tone a mix of anger and disbelief. When he hung up, he explained that they were taking his mother into custody. The next few days were a blur. Our son, tiny and fragile, fought for his life in his glass little bed, surrounded by beeping machines and bustling nurses. I prayed every moment I was awake, my heart living in that incubator with him. Linda was charged and brought to trial. Her defense was absurd. She claimed it was all a joke, that she'd wanted to prove I was lying about my pregnancy. I didn't mean any harm, she told the court. I just wanted everyone to see the truth. But the evidence was undeniable. The video didn't lie. The judge sentenced her to 2 years and ordered her to pay restitution. The sale of her house would cover the medical expenses and rehabilitation for our son. Months rolled into a year, and our little boy grew stronger every day. The rehabilitation was tough, endless appointments and therapies. But he was a fighter, and slowly, he caught up to his peers. By his second birthday, you couldn't tell he had such a rough start. Jake and I were a team through it all, our bond solidified through the trials we'd faced. As for Linda, her actions had severed any chance of reconciliation. I made it clear, and Jake agreed, that she was not to be part of our lives or our son's life. It was a harsh decision, but necessary for our family's well-being. And as I watched our son, healthy, happy, and vibrant, it felt like the entire universe had shifted, aligning just for us, in spite of everything. Linda's shadows no longer lingered, all that remained was the light of our little family, stronger and more radiant than ever. Life's been a series of tough breaks and lucky strikes. Losing my parents early stung like hell, but I got lucky when the elderly couple next door, the Parkers, took me in. They were the kindest souls you could imagine, treating me more like a granddaughter than a charity case. We weren't rich in money, but we were wealthy in love, and that's what mattered. Then, just as I was coming into my own, turning 18 and thinking about college, they died in a car accident. Just like that, I was on my own again. The Parkers left me a bit of money for school and their old house in the suburbs. It was a cozy place, full of memories, but too many ghosts for me. So, I sold it and bought a small apartment in the city near the college where I'd enrolled to study financial management. It felt good, having a plan, moving forward. Classes were tough but interesting, and I threw myself into learning everything about numbers and markets. After college, I landed a decent job. Daytimes were packed with work, and I was doing all right, but nights were another story. The city felt lonelier than it should for a place so full. That's when I met Tom at a friend's party. He was loud, funny, and didn't care who knew it. His energy was infectious, and we hit it off from the moment he bumped into me, spilling my drink. "Hey, watch it." I snapped, more out of surprise than anger. "Whoa, my bad. Let me make it up to you. What were you drinking?" Tom grinned, unapologetically charming. "Beer, just beer," I said, trying not to smile too easily. "2 beers coming right up," he shouted over the music, heading to the makeshift bar. That was Tom all over, simple, straightforward, and no fuss. We spent the whole night talking about everything and nothing. It turned out we both loved old movies and hated sushi. It was easy, talking to him, and by the time the party was winding down, I didn't want to say goodbye. A year later, he proposed. No dramatic gestures, just him, me, and a ring he fumbled out of his pocket while we were watching TV. "Marry me," he told, holding the ring so tightly I thought he might crush it. I laughed. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so typical of us, so perfectly imperfect. "Yes, of course, you big goof." Getting married didn't change much at first. We were the same, just legally bound, which felt right. We settled into life together in my small city apartment, still close to the hustle, but now with someone to share the quiet moments. Life felt full, and for the first time in a long while, the evenings didn't feel so empty. Settling into married life had its comforts, but life sure doesn't let you get too cozy without throwing a curveball or two. Jake's folks, Mr. and Mrs. Harper, were gems. Living in their cozy suburban home, they welcomed me with open arms from the get-go. I could see where Jake got his easygoing nature. Their warmth was a balm on my oftentimes still sore heart, still aching from my own family losses. "So happy you're part of our family now," Mrs. Harper would often say, squeezing my hand with a kindness that felt both uplifting and overwhelming. "Thanks, I really appreciate how welcoming you've been," I'd reply, feeling genuinely grateful. Visiting them became our weekend ritual. Those days were filled with backyard barbecues and lengthy chats over cups of steaming coffee. Life was good, simple, and honest, until it wasn't. Jake got called away on a long business trip, a whole year out of state. It was a fantastic opportunity for his career, but the timing was brutal. No sooner had Jake left than Mr. Harper's health took a nosedive. It happened fast, and Mrs. Harper, bless her heart, sounded near out of her mind with worry when she called. "Kimberly, I hate to ask, but I could really use your help around here. George is really not doing well." Her voice was thick with unshed tears. Without a second thought, I packed a bag and headed to the suburbs. Seeing Mr. Harper so frail shook me. He had always been a pillar, strong and steady. Now, he looked shrunken, tethered to his life through a maze of medical tubes. I slipped into the routine of their household seamlessly, handling the cooking and cleaning while Mrs. Harper focused on George's care. Evenings I spent sitting by Mr. Harper's side, reading out loud his favorite classics, his eyes often fluttering closed long before I finished a chapter. "Thank you, Kimberly," he'd whisper on good days, his voice a shadow of his former robust tone. "It's my pleasure, really," I'd squeeze his hand, trying to offer comfort through simple touch. One quiet afternoon, Mrs. Harper sat down at the kitchen table while I was chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked worn, older than her years. "Kimberly, I don't know how to say this, but we're in a bit of a bind," she began, wringing her hands nervously. "George was the main earner, you know, and with him like this." I put down the knife, giving her my full attention. "We're strapped, honey. I hate to even ask, but could you consider renting out your apartment? It might help us get through this tough spot." She looked down, clearly embarrassed. I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, Mrs. Harper. I'll get on it right away," I said firmly, trying to ease her burden. The apartment rented out quickly, and every month, I dutifully transferred the rental income to Mrs. Harper, along with money for groceries and whatever bills piled up. It wasn't easy. The commute to my job in the city became a nightmare. But family sticks together, right? That's what I kept telling myself, even on the hardest days. "Kimberly, you're a godsend," Mrs. Harper would often say, her relief palpable each time I handed her the money. "It's what family does," I'd respond, though some nights, as I lay in the guest room listening to the distant sounds of sirens from the city, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. Jake's calls were my only respite, his voice a tether to another life. "How's it going, Kim? You holding up okay?" His concern was always evident, even through the static of long-distance calls. "We're managing. Don't worry about us." I'd forced cheerfulness into my voice, not wanting to add to his stress. Life in the Harper household took a drastic turn when Susan, Mrs. Harper's daughter from her first marriage, showed up unexpectedly. The vibe shifted immediately. She had that kind of presence, like a cold breeze that sneaks under the door. I never really knew Susan well, but I'd heard enough from Jake and even glimpsed her frosty relationship with Mr. Harper during brief, tense visits. My days had already stretched thin, juggling long commutes to work and caring for Mr. Harper, who was now bedridden and fading fast. Susan's arrival, however, added a whole new layer of tension. It was clear she was here to stay, making herself at home as if she owned the place. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Mr. Harper beckoned me to his side with a weak gesture. His voice was a hoarse whisper, strained and urgent. "Kimberly, you need to watch out for Susan. She's a very bad person." I leaned closer, the gravity in his tone pulling a knot tight in my stomach. "I understand, Mr. Harper. I'll be careful," I promised, though I wasn't exactly sure what I was promising against. True to Mr. Harper's warning, Susan wasted no time establishing her new regime. The first sign was when I found her in the kitchen one morning, her presence like a storm cloud over the breakfast nook. "Just so we're clear, I'm not here to play housemaid or chef for anyone," she declared, her tone sharp as she sipped her coffee, eyeing me like I was an intruder in her mother's kitchen. I was taken aback, but managed to keep my cool. "Okay, Susan. I've been handling things so far, and I can keep at it," I said, trying to keep the peace. "Good, because I don't plan on lifting a finger. This is Mom's house, after all," she snapped back, her eyes daring me to challenge her. From that day on, Susan made sure her presence was felt and not in a good way. She'd order takeout just for herself and her mother, leaving their empty boxes on the table for me to clean up. Her disdain wasn't subtle, and it stung, but I swallowed the bitterness, because Mr. Harper needed peace. "Kimberly, why don't you sit and eat with us tonight?" Mrs. Harper asked one evening, a rare moment of old warmth in her voice. Before I could respond, Susan cut in sharply. "Mom, Kimberly's been busy all day, she probably prefers eating later." Her words were coated with fake concern, but the message was clear: I wasn't welcome. The days grew heavier, my chores doubling as Susan's entitlement filled every corner of the house. I'd hear her late at night, whispering with her mother, turning her against me with poison words. Mrs. Harper, once so kind and understanding, started to change too, her looks colder, her thank yous fewer. A couple of weeks later, Mr. Harper was gone. The funeral was a solemn affair, with Jake flying in just in time to say his goodbyes. It was the first time in months we were together, and the relief of having him by my side was palpable. Yet, amidst the mourning, I noticed the air had shifted significantly at the Harper residence. Susan was on her best behavior, treating everyone with a forced politeness. "How's everything been while I've been gone?" Jake asked me quietly during a brief moment we had alone after the service. "Fine, everything's been fine," I lied, forcing a smile. I didn't want to burden him further, his grief was enough to handle. "You sure? You look a bit worn out," he pressed, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's just been busy, you know, helping out around here," I reassured him, avoiding his gaze. It wasn't the time to delve into the mess that was brewing beneath the surface. As soon as Jake left, Susan dropped her act. The mask of the dutiful sister was gone, replaced by the sneering, dismissive attitude I'd grown accustomed to. The dynamic in the house shifted drastically. Mrs. Harper, perhaps in her own throbbing grief, became distant and cold towards me. Commands replaced conversations, and I felt more like an intruder than a family member. Susan took over the household like she was the lady of the manor. Her reign was marked by disregard for anyone's feelings but her own. She started barging into my room without knocking, rummaging through my things as though she was searching for buried treasure. One afternoon, I was out in the garden trying to find some peace, when I stumbled upon a box lying among the shrubs. Curiosity piqued, I opened it, only to find my watches, jewelry, and even some underwear. My heart sank. Nearby, draped carelessly over a bush, were several of my dresses. Fury bubbled up inside me as I gathered my belongings. Clutching the box, I stormed inside, finding Susan in the living room, lounging like she owned the place. "What the hell, Susan?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. "You can't just throw my stuff out." Susan laughed, a cold, harsh sound that echoed mockingly around the room. "Live here? Please, you're just a guest, and not a welcome one. You should be out in the garden, or better yet, on the street. You're nothing but a rootless beggar anyway." Her words stung like salt in a wound. I couldn't believe the venom in her voice. Trembling, I turned to Mrs. Harper, who had just entered the room. "Mrs. Harper, please, tell her she can't treat me like this. This is supposed to be my home too," I pleaded, my voice cracking. Mrs. Harper, once kind and gentle, now looked through me as if I were glass. "This is Susan's house now." "She's right, Kimberly. Maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live." Her words were a blow I hadn't anticipated. I stood there, the box in my hands, my heart breaking in my chest. The home I had come to know, the family I thought I had, crumbled around me in that instant. Despite everything, I stayed because of a promise I made to Mr. Harper on his deathbed, to look after his wife and not let Susan overpower her. But day by day, Mrs. Harper seemed to adopt Susan's cruel traits, her words turning sharp, her eyes cold. "You're just sitting on your hands here, aren't you?" Mrs. Harper snapped one evening as I cleaned up after dinner, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm doing my best to keep things running smoothly," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt her words caused. "Best? Could have fooled me. Seems like you're just freeloading," she scoffed, turning her back to me as she left the room. Her words stung. I was far from a freeloader. I had rented out my apartment and transferred nearly all that income to Mrs. Harper, on top of handling most of the housework, while Susan did nothing but criticize. Susan, living off her mother's pension, was relentless. "Really, what did my brother even see in you?" she would taunt me nightly, her voice loud enough to carry through the thin walls. I'd bite my tongue, swallow the anger and frustration, and remind myself of the promise I made. But the atmosphere was suffocating, the house a minefield of hostility. One evening, coming home early from work, my world tilted on its axis. I walked in to hear Susan and Mrs. Harper in the middle of a heated discussion in the living room, not noticing my arrival. "We need to get her to sell that apartment of hers. You know how much we could use that money," Susan was saying, her tone greedy and calculating. "Yes, but how do we convince her? Kimberly's no fool, she won't just hand it over," Mrs. Harper replied, her voice a mix of frustration and greed. "Leave it to me, Mom. I'll sweet-talk her into it. Once she signs it over, we can finally live the way we deserve." Susan's words slithered through the air like a snake. Hearing them plot to strip me of my only financial security was a cold splash of reality. Fear gripped me. I couldn't stay, not anymore. My heart pounding, I slipped away to my room unnoticed. They were planning to rob me of everything. The decision was made right then, there was no staying after this. I hurriedly packed my essentials, my hands shaking. Every second in that house now felt like a countdown to disaster. I didn't bother with goodbyes, they didn't deserve them. Slipping out the back door, I ordered a taxi to the station. Sitting on the train to Jake's state, doubts swirled in my mind. Would Jake understand? Would he take their side? The uncertainty was crushing, but the fear of what might happen if I stayed was worse. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur by, a mix of fear and resolve settling in my chest. When I arrived at Jake's place, his reaction was a cocktail of shock, relief, and a swirl of questions. His eyes widened as he opened the door to find me standing there, bag in hand, looking probably as frazzled as I felt. "Kimberly? What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. I hesitated, taking in the familiar, comforting sight of his temporary home. "No, Jake, everything's not okay. Not at all," I replied, my voice catching a bit. He led me to the couch, his expression now lined with worry. "Talk to me, babe. What happened?" I told him everything, starting from Susan's return, the worsening conditions at home, the financial manipulations, and the final straw, the plot to make me sell my apartment. I hadn't wanted to worry him before, didn't want to add to his stress while he was away working. Jake's face darkened with each word I spoke. By the time I finished, his fists were clenched, his jaw set hard. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and concern. "I didn't want to cause more trouble. I thought I could handle it," I admitted, feeling foolish now. "Kimberly, damn it, you shouldn't have to handle anything like that alone," he exploded, standing up to pace the room. "I can't believe my mom and Susan would treat you this way." He stopped and looked at me, his eyes intense. "I'm not letting anyone treat my wife like that. No way," he declared, pulling out his phone. I watched, heart pounding, as he dialed his mother. The phone barely rang twice before she picked up. I couldn't hear her words, but the stiffness in Jake's shoulders told me enough. "Mom, this has to stop. I know about everything, and I won't tolerate it. If Susan doesn't leave, and if you don't start treating Kimberly with respect, you can forget about us helping out anymore. No more money, no more nothing." Jake's voice was steel, not giving room for any argument. There was a brief, fiery exchange, then silence. Jake's hand tightened around the phone. "Fine, if that's your choice, then you've made mine," he said finally, and hung up. He turned to look at me, his expression softening. "Looks like it's just us now, babe. That's all we need," he said, coming over to wrap me in his arms. I leaned into him, the safety of his embrace fortifying me against the whirlwind of emotions. "Just us," I murmured, feeling the truth of his words. We were on our own now, but somehow, that felt okay. Jake and I talked long into the night. We discussed practical things like my remote work arrangements and our financial plans without the extra drain of supporting his mother and Susan. It felt like we were laying the foundations for a new chapter, just the two of us. Whatever happens, we're in this together. You and me against the world, right? Jake said with a determined grin. Right, I smiled back, feeling more confident with him by my side. Against the world. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I contacted my job to arrange remote work, which thankfully, they agreed to. Jake helped me move my things from storage and set up a home office in the corner of his living room. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was peaceful. A week into our newfound peace, I was jolted by a call that almost felt like a ghost from a past life. It was Mrs. Harper. Her voice, once sweet to me, now dripped with a mix of desperation and audacity. Kimberly, why haven't I received the money for this month? You know we depend on it, she demanded right off the bat. I was stunned silent for a moment, her nerve unbelievable. I'm sorry, but after everything, you really expect me to continue supporting you? I asked, my tone more incredulous than angry. In the background, I could hear Susan's voice, shrill and angry. She's just an ungrateful girl, Mom. Make her transfer the money. Taking a deep breath to calm my rising anger, I remembered the venomous words they had thrown at me, words that stung deep. Mrs. Harper, Susan called me a rootless beggar, remember? I'm not sending money to people who treat me like trash. I'm done. There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost picture Mrs. Harper's shocked face. But we're family, she finally said, her voice a mixture of anger and pleading. No, family doesn't treat each other that way. Goodbye, Mrs. Harper, I said firmly and hung up before she could respond. The call shook me, but Jake was right there, his support unwavering. You did the right thing, Kimberly. It's time they learn to stand on their own, he reassured me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. Not long after settling back into our hometown, another surprise came our way. I was pregnant. The news brought a joy we hadn't expected, and suddenly, the future seemed filled with possibilities. We decided it was time to sell my apartment and buy a small house in the suburbs, a place near a good school where our child could grow up. As we were planning our move, another call came, and again from Mrs. Harper. Her tone was different this time, desperate, almost pitiful. Kimberly, I've made a mistake. Susan forced me to sell the house, took the money, and left me with nothing. Could I come and live with you and Jake? Her voice was shaky, pleading. The request stunned me. After everything, this was a test of my resolve. Mrs. Harper, you chose this path when you sided with Susan against us. You could have chosen differently, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know I've made mistakes, but you have a kind heart. Can't you forgive an old woman for her wrong choices? She implored. I sighed, feeling a pang of pity, but remembering the pain her choices had caused. I forgave you long ago, but that doesn't mean I can let you back into my life. You need to live with the consequences of your actions, just as I have, I replied and ended the call. Then, with a resolute tap, I blocked her number. We moved forward with our plans, purchasing a quaint house with a little garden where our child could play. It was a lazy Sunday morning, the kind where you linger over coffee and the newspaper. I was flipping through the pages when a headline caught my eye, local woman arrested for massive fraud scheme. There, staring back at me from the paper, was Susan, handcuffed and looking defeated. I couldn't help the mix of shock and, admittedly, a slight vindication that washed over me. Look at this, Jake, I called out, holding up the newspaper for him to see. It's Susan. She's been arrested for fraud. Jake took the newspaper, scanning the article with a serious expression. Wow, can't say I'm surprised, but still, it's a lot to take in. Yeah, it is. But she made her choices, and now she's facing the consequences, I replied, feeling a closure I hadn't realized I needed. The news eventually drifted to us through friends that Mrs. Harper was living in a tiny apartment, working 2 jobs to scrape by. Her pension wasn't enough to cover her living expenses and pay off the debts Susan had left her with. Did you hear about your mom? one of Jake's friends, Matt, brought it up one evening when they were over for a backyard barbecue. "Yeah, I heard," Jake responded, flipping burgers on the grill. His voice held a trace of sadness, but it was tempered with resolve. "She chose her path, Matt. It's tough, but that's how it is." Matt nodded, understanding the unspoken boundaries. "You're right, man. Just thought you should know." The conversation shifted after that, the evening air filled with the lighter topics of sports and work. Life had moved on, and so had we. The joy of our new life really crystallized when Mia came into the world. Becoming parents changed everything. It shifted our priorities, our dreams, and even healed some of the old wounds by filling them with new love. "Can you believe she's ours?" I whispered to Jake one night as we watched Mia sleeping peacefully in her crib. "She's perfect, Kimberly. Just perfect," Jake murmured back, his voice thick with emotion. We spent our days marveling at each little milestone Mia achieved, each smile, each giggle. She was our little miracle, and with her, the hardships of the past seemed to recede, making room for new memories, better ones. Each day was simple, but filled with little moments of joy that stitched a tapestry of a happy family life.